let's just wait a minute and see if we get another person or two. Here comes somebody. Hey, Kathy.
Kathy.
Hello.
So it won't just be two people, Kathleen.
What am I, chopped liver?
This is great.
4 people, Eric.
At our recent board meeting, Kathy and another member of our board, Tom West, agreed to begin work on a task force for environmental sustainability. So we're excited to have this first opportunity. So I think we will get started at 7:01, and I know Kathleen has another meeting after this because Kathleen was very kind. When we were scheduling this meeting, I dropped the ball. I thought we were scheduled and I hadn't followed through with Kathleen about our flyer or a Zoom link, and so she thought we weren't meeting. So she has rearranged her schedule so that she can be here tonight, and I'm really thrilled to have Kathleen Sexton from the Clinton River Watershed Conservancy with us tonight. So without further ado, Kathleen, take it away.
Thank you so much. All right, I will share my screen and start the presentation. So let me see if I can pull up my notes here. Here we go. All right, my name is Kathleen Sexton, and I'm the Director of Education and Stewardship at the Clinton River Watershed Council. It's kind of a mouthful. We are a nonprofit organization, and we work closely with a lot of communities and members of the public, as well as other nonprofits, to protect water quality and surface waters. And so we work very closely with the city of Rochester, Rochester Hills, as well as many other local communities. So you guys might be familiar in Rochester, there is the Pink Creek that flows through there, and that is actually a prized fishery for trout. And it's a very popular fishing destination, and as well as there's other assets in the region that are really important, and we want to make sure they stay protected and healthy for years to come. So without further ado, I'm going to launch into the presentation, and I will talk a little bit more about all of that and how you guys can get involved and work with us too. So I'm going to give you guys a brief introduction of the Watershed Council, who we are and what we do. I'm going to talk to you guys about what a watershed is, because that word comes up a lot. And then a little bit more about the specifics of the Clinton River Watershed and the Great Lakes Basin. And then your sub-watershed, so where you are specifically in Rochester and the resources that you're connected to, how you can protect your water, our watershed, and then how you can get involved. So to start, almost 50 years ago, the Watershed Council began, and it was not in great shape. So the Clinton River kind of still has a negative stigma attached to it. These photos are a little hard to see, but if you look closely, there are almost entire cars that have been dumped in the river and lots of trash. There wasn't a lot of regulation, and there wasn't a lot of wildlife or fish present. You know, the DNR did a survey and they didn't find any live fish in the main branch up to the confluence with the North Branch. But now that same area, because of the Watershed Council and other regional efforts, like I said, has some of the best trout fishing in Southeast Michigan. So we've really come a long way in terms of making the river better. So we were established in 1972, and we began as an association of wastewater treatment plant operators and other local governments. And then the Clean Water Act was also passed that same year. So it further encouraged water quality as being an important issue. And so who are we today? We are a local nonprofit working to protect, enhance, and celebrate the Clinton River, its watershed, and Lake St. Clair. And we do that in 3 main program areas of education, stewardship, and watershed management. And feel free, if you guys have questions at any time, you can ask, or we can ask questions at the end, but I forgot to mention that earlier. So real quick about our watershed. So what exactly is a watershed? I'm saying that a lot. Well, a watershed is any specific area of land that drains into a common body of water. And not only are we talking about the water resources like the lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, groundwater. We're also talking about the land. So the buildings, the homes, the people, we're all part of a watershed. We all live in a watershed. No matter where you are in the world, you're in a watershed of something. So in this case, we're talking about.
We're in the watershed, they said.
Yep, we are in a watershed. We're in the Clinton River Watershed. And everything that like every water resource in the Clinton River Watershed ultimately ends up in Lake St. Clair, right? So you can see the main branch right here is this darker blue line. And all these smaller blue lines are tributaries, but all of these are connected ultimately to the main branch that comes out into the mouth of the river in Harrison Township into Lake St. Clair. Lake St. Clair is a drinking water source for 4 million people in Canada and the United States and Southeast Michigan. So really important that we make sure we keep it clean. It encompasses parts of 5 different counties. So Oakland, Macomb, Lapeer, St. Clair, and parts of Wayne County. There are 75 communities located within this region. It's 760 square miles, so a pretty large service area. You can see the headwaters start in Springfield and Independence Township. They go through all these communities. Here's Rochester right in the middle here, out to Harrison Township. It's densely populated with 1.5 million people, and the river itself is almost 82 miles long from headwaters to mouth. So we're talking about a large service area. We're talking about a lot of water, and we're talking about something that's a really vital resource that we want to protect. So how does it all connect? So if we start with water in the Clinton River, like I said, that goes to Lake St. Clair. Lake St. Clair drains south through the Detroit River into Lake Erie. Lake Erie goes through the Niagara River and over the Niagara Falls to Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario goes into the St. Lawrence River or St. Lawrence Seaway and ultimately out to the Atlantic Ocean. So we do have a connection to our oceans. And as you guys know, if you remember from elementary school, the water cycle, evaporation, the water goes up, comes down as rain, and that's how everything's all connected. So it really is important that we make sure we keep our water clean. So you can't talk about water quality in Michigan without mentioning the Great Lakes. We have such a precious resource here. The Great Lakes themselves are 20% of the fresh water in the entire world, all the surface water, and it's 90% of the fresh water in the United States. So that's a lot of water, a lot of fresh water. It's an estimated 6 quadrillion gallons of water. I don't know what 6 quadrillion looks like. I know that it's a lot. But if you wanted to visualize it, if you took all the water out of the Great Lakes and poured it over the lower 48 states, it'd be about 9.5 feet of water. So that's, almost as tall as the ceiling in your home. We have 3,288 miles of shoreline here in Michigan between the upper and lower peninsula. There's only one state in the country that has more shoreline, and that's Alaska. So we have more than Texas, we have more than Florida, and we have more than California. So that's a huge resource in and of itself. And lots of miles of rivers and inland lakes. And we all know that we use fresh water for so many different reasons. We use it for drinking, irrigation, recreation, the scenic value, the ecological value, the economic value between our marine industry, our fishing industry. So we really are very lucky with the Great Lakes here in Michigan, and we need to make sure we protect that resource. So a sub-watershed is actually just a smaller watershed in within the bigger watershed, right? So Rochester is unique in that it actually touches part of 3 different sub-watersheds. So the main branch here is light blue, Paint Creek is dark blue, and then Stony Creek is this green color. So these are all the different sub-watersheds, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more specifics about what the assets and resources are in those different sub-watersheds. So the main branch is about 70 square miles. It's in Oakland County. It has a pretty large population with 243,000 estimated people. That's from the 2010 census, so we'll get a new number here soon. It holds things like the Clinton River Trail. It's a very popular paddling destination. There's the Paddlepalooza event every year in Auburn Hills. We use it for fishing, paddling, recreation, and education. And a little known fact is that the river actually goes underground through the city of Pontiac. So it dips down about 15 feet, anywhere from 15 to 30 feet underground through a pipe. It goes underneath the Phoenix Center, and then it comes out just on the west side of the city. Paint Creek subwatershed, like I said, it's the dark blue here. So As I mentioned, this is one of Southeast Michigan's only cold water trout streams, so it's a favorite for fishermen and anglers. It flows through downtown Rochester and downtown Lake Orion. This region is approximately 70 square miles. It's in Oakland County, and we have Gallagher Creek, Sargent Creek, and Pate Creek all within this sub-watershed. And then Stony Creek. So Stony Creek is home to Stony Creek Metro Park, Addison Oaks County Park, Bald Mountain State Recreation Area. It's popular for recreation. It's got lots of wooded areas, lots of wildlife, and lots of really clean surface water. The branch of Stony Creek is somewhere we find some of the most diversity in terms of wildlife and aquatic bugs that we look for, that we hunt for to look at water quality. So now that I mentioned water quality, let's talk a little bit about that. So historically, the Clinton River did have some issues with water quality. There was a lack of policy and regulation. So people were dumping into the river. It wasn't regulated. There weren't any penalties for that, which led to industrial waste. It led to contaminated sediments, and then development, which led to loss of wetlands and shoreline hardening. So these were all things that were changing the dynamic of the river, and they were changing the quality of the river and making it worse. And then the Clean Water Act was established in 1972. This is administered by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but it also is regulated by the state, so Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE. They also enforce these regulations and make sure that people are not, polluting the river in ways that they're not supposed to. Everything is highly regulated, and it upholds water quality standards for surface waters, and it also comes with penalties for polluters. So people can't just do whatever they want now in terms of using the river as a dumping ground. But we still have some issues today. We do have some issues with fecal bacteria contamination, whether that's from a combined sewer overflow or failing septic systems. A lot of the septic systems in Michigan are aging, like other infrastructure, and they need to be updated or replaced. Contaminated sediments are persisting from, the industrial era. This is sediment that has pollution in it, and it's not really sure who's responsible for cleaning it up. It's expensive to clean up, and there are some of these areas that still persist. Flooding is a common issue that we're seeing more frequently these days, as well as increased water temperatures. So that's not as, some fish really need colder water to survive. Additional chemicals like PFAS and other things that are being discovered. But the biggest source of water pollution for our watershed is stormwater pollution. So what exactly is stormwater pollution? Stormwater pollution is hard to pinpoint, right? It's a non-point source because it's a result of a bunch of different collective behaviors. So essentially, stormwater is water that it's rainwater or snowmelt that runs off of impervious surfaces, meaning surfaces that can't absorb water, like roads, rooftops, driveways, parking lots, sidewalks, and sometimes even our mowed lawns. They're not really great at absorbing water as well as a wetland or a forest. And this water ends up running off into the river. And most of the time it is not treated. So these storm drains here, I know you guys have all seen one of these before, right? These actually are directly connected to our tributaries and to the main branch of the river, because we used to have them combined. So we used to have the stormwater and the sanitary water both going to a wastewater treatment plant. But we found out that as we developed more and as we had a larger and growing population, there wasn't a way for the system to gather all of that water during a rain event. And so then we were having overflows of sewage, and that wasn't good. So then we separated them. Now we have a sanitary sewer and a storm sewer. The sanitary sewer gets treated. The storm sewer does not. So as I mentioned, it's going to carry anything that's across on these different, on the impervious surfaces directly to the river. So what are these stormwater pollutants? What can they include? So anything from fertilizers, whether it's from your lawn or agricultural fertilizers, sediments from construction, oil and gas from cars or detergents from washing cars, pet waste, which may not seem like a big deal, but I think almost everybody in my neighborhood has a dog. And if everybody let their dog waste just stay on the ground, we'd have a huge issue in terms of fecal contamination, as well as agricultural runoff like erosion and litter, just general people littering or trash ending up in the river. So why is this a problem? Let's look into it a little bit. But first, we need to think about rainfall on natural surfaces. So when rain falls on a natural surface, they actually do a really good job of absorbing that rainwater and the snow melt. So one mature tree can absorb over 4,000 gallons of stormwater per year. And all of different native plants and wetlands in these areas can actually intercept that stormwater. They can slow it down, they can filter it, and recharge the groundwater. But when we think about our roads and our homes and businesses, there's not a lot of natural surfaces there. So what does that mean? That means that when it does rain or when snow melts, the water is running off at a much faster rate than it naturally would. And it's picking up all the things along the way that are pollutants, and it's carrying them directly to our rivers, lakes, and streams, which that's sort of a fact of life, right? I mean, we have 1.5 million people. Sustaining the population does require impervious surfaces. It requires industry. It requires transportation. So how do we figure out a balance? What can we do to make it better? Let's see. So as I mentioned, the quantity of stormwater entering our rivers, lakes, and streams and the pollutants it carries does degrade aquatic habitat and water quality. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. This slide probably should have been sooner, but just the distinction, because not a lot of people know this, when you use water in your homes, I mean, some people do, but just in case you don't, when you use water in your homes, whether you're using the kitchen sink or the bathroom sink or taking a shower or doing laundry, that water gets taken away through a pipe to a wastewater treatment plant and it's treated. There's no way for it to get to anywhere unless there's a failing infrastructure before it's treated. Whereas stormwater does not get treated. So this is precipitation and things that run off the street and it gets taken directly to the stream. So where are we now in terms of our approach to stormwater management? Well, stormwater management has to be taken into consideration during development. There are regulations and laws that make that so. Green infrastructure, which we'll talk a little bit about later, can be used to slow and reduce stormwater flows. And education is a key factor in raising awareness about stormwater pollution. So talking to you guys now, this is part of what we're doing to make it better, right? Educating people about what it is and then how we can solve it. So the good news, as I mentioned before, we can all help. There are ways to find a balance between the infrastructure that we need to, thrive as a population and controlling stormwater. So the responsibility of keeping our waterways clean does not fall on any one entity or individual. As I mentioned, there's 1.5 million people in the watershed. There's thousands of storm drains. So every time it rains, that's hundreds of thousands of gallons of stormwater entering our river. So it does make a huge difference if we can all commit to small actions in your everyday life. That will make a big difference over time when we're thinking about millions of people. So some of the simple ways you can get involved in protecting your water, well, you guys are already doing it. You're coming to this presentation because you want to learn about what you can do to be more environmentally friendly. So taking steps to educate yourself is a good first step. You can also educate your friends, family, and your coworkers or colleagues about what you learned today. Native landscaping and green infrastructure. So I'll talk a little bit about that in just a few slides. You can volunteer with us and become a community scientist. So we train volunteers about how to collect water quality data. It's a lot of fun. You go out in teams twice a year and you get to have your site that you go to every year and collect data. You can volunteer at one of our cleanups. We do multiple cleanups throughout the year. And you can also become river safe, lake safe. So that's an education campaign for watershed homeowners on how they can be more environmentally friendly and protect water quality. So some watershed friendly landscaping tips. So if you have a yard, not everybody has a yard, right? Like some people live in apartments or condos, but if you do have a yard, that's kind of your first I guess, your battleground when it comes to stormwater. So how can you keep the stormwater from running off your property? How can you intercept it on your property and keep it there? You can use native plants or plant more plants or trees that will actually absorb water. Install a rain barrel. So rain barrels catch rainwater and then you can use it to water those plants. Native species actually have much deeper roots and they can hold more water than turf grass. So try to swap out some native plant species for turf grass. Install a rain garden. That's essentially just, a small engineered wetland that you can plant in your home. And it looks really beautiful. You can get a lot of different native plants and it will hold thousands of gallons of stormwater if built correctly. One thing to keep in mind is you can test your soil before you need to determine if you really need to use fertilizer or not. A lot of times people do tend to over fertilize. Most of the time, depending on where you are, I mean, sometimes you have sand, sometimes you have clay, but most of the time you really only need to fertilize once a year, if that, and your plants will do just fine. Especially native plants, because they're adapted to the Michigan climate, they don't need a lot of excess nutrients or excess water. So once they're established, they're pretty easy to maintain. Green infrastructure. So when we think about green infrastructure, let's take a step back and look at what infrastructure is. So that's just different things that we use to function as a society. So gray infrastructure are the sewer pipes that I mentioned, the roads, the roofs, the buildings. That's gray infrastructure. Green infrastructure is things that serve those purposes, but they are natural, they're vegetation. So this could be a roof that's covered in different plants. That's a green roof. As I mentioned, rain barrels and rain gardens. Permeable pavement, so putting in pavers with a little bit of grass or other vegetation where water can actually soak down through those instead of running off. Bioswales, which is essentially like a roadside ditch or an area in a parking lot that has native plants, and even planter boxes. So all different kinds of examples, and they don't have to be a giant project. It could just be something small that you start at your home. But green infrastructure is meant to mimic natural systems like wetlands and forests to capture, soak up, filter, and store water. And it does work. We work with a lot of communities through our Water Towns program to get them engaged and actually do different project installations for green infrastructure, and also do some community connection and cultural connection to water resources, which Rochester already does a great job of. Green infrastructure aims to reduce stormwater surges and the amount of pollutants entering local waterways. So some of the benefits, it filters stormwater, as I mentioned, so it's going to improve water quality and it's going to reduce the quantity that's running off. Native plants and trees can lower air temperature, reduce smog, and actually filter and absorb particulate matter from the air. So we're increasing the air quality here. Provides native habitat for wildlife and other pollinators. And it promotes economic growth because it promotes community. It encourages recreation, it increases property value. It's a very nice aesthetic feel. So lots of different benefits here of green infrastructure. You can also, like I mentioned, become river safe, lake safe. So this is an education campaign where we help homeowners learn how to incorporate best management practices for watershed health at home. And then you can take a self-assessment and deem yourself river safe, lake safe if you pass the assessment. And the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you guys just about a few different tips.
Do you want the screen?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you guys about a few different tips that deem you river safe, lake safe. So just be responsible when applying substances like fertilizer, road salt, cleanser, pesticides, and herbicides. And you can also even look for alternatives that are organic, natural, or environmentally friendly. There are some DIY substances that you can make at home, or you can buy organic ones at your local hardware store. Sweep it up. So if you do decide to fertilize and there's a bunch left on the sidewalks and driveways, that can wash off really easily into storm drains, and that's not good for what lives in the river. So sweep it back onto the lawn so that it gets absorbed into the ground versus running directly off. Saves you money, and it saves us, it saves our lakes and streams from water quality issues. This is an interesting one. So this woman is washing her car on the grass versus in the driveway. Why do you guys think that would be useful? Does anybody want to take a stab at it? So when she's washing her car, oh, did you want to answer?
Oh, it just has it on the
Yeah,
on the slide there, but yes.
the
So it
answer's right
prevents
there.
runoff, yeah.
Exactly. So the water is absorbed and filtered through the ground instead of running directly off the driveway. You can also take your car to get it washed at a car wash, because those are connected to a sanitary sewer. That water is going to be treated, and it's not going to end up in the lake or the river. Here's an example of a yard that's River Safe, Lake Safe certified. And I think Jean was telling us about one of her friends or colleagues that she just visited that also has a really beautiful native plant garden. I just bought my house a year and a half ago, and so I'm also working on, you know, adding a lot of things to the garden. It's quite a lot of work, but it's fun work, you know, and it's beautiful. So, and you just do it one step at a time. You don't have to do your entire yard in 1 year. Other ways that you can get involved: you can join the Watershed Council in protecting our fresh waters through membership or volunteering. So we have multiple cleanup programs. Every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to noon, we have a weekly clean program. And this is in a different location in the watershed every week. It's free. Everybody is welcome to come. It's family friendly. You don't need to register. All the locations are listed on our website. And so you can pick, you know, if there's one in Rochester or Rochester Hills or Oakland Township or somewhere local, you can visit that one. We also have the Clinton cleanup every September. So this could be a good idea for you guys if you wanted to get involved as a group. You could do a cleanup in your area or even around your church and be part of our Clinton cleanup. So that's a day. It's always the third Saturday in September. I think it's the 18th this year. I'd have to double check. But we just try to get as many people out on one day and see how much trash we can collect in one day. And it's a lot of fun. So here's some photos of some of our dedicated volunteers doing some of our cleanups. Another way, as I mentioned, was our community science program, Adopt a Stream. So you get trained on how to identify things like this down here. This is a stonefly. And actually a lot of flying insects spend most of their life in the river. And they're really good indicators of water quality because they are not very mobile. So they're where they are found, you can tell what the water quality is there. So for example, this guy, the stonefly, he can only survive in areas with like high dissolved oxygen and low amounts of pollution. So if you find a stonefly, you know that you're in a region where there's really good water quality. And conversely, there's some things that you'll find pretty commonly and even in degraded areas. So this is a really fun, easy way to quickly identify the water quality and collect some data. So if you're interested in that, you can be a part of our Adopt a Stream program. And here's some pictures of our volunteers there. Other ways to get involved: if you don't want to do a cleanup and you don't want to collect bugs, which is totally fair, you can just become a member. You can donate. We also have a Crafts on the Clinton event, which is where we have different wine and craft beer, and also different you know, crafts and vendors that people are selling things that they make. And that's a really fun way to get involved, and you don't have to put waders on. We also have our Clinton River Quest. So this is a scavenger hunt where it's very family friendly. You register, you get a t-shirt and a guidebook, and you're able to pick out 8 different activities to complete in order to be deemed a river ranger. That's a great way to support us there. So lots of different ways to get involved. If you want specific examples, these are some upcoming presentations and events that we have. So all of these are listed at crwc.org/events. We have our stormwater presentations. We have native landscaping for pollinators and water quality, and also one about rain gardens. These are both virtual presentations, and they're free and open to the public. So if you want to register, just visit crwc.org/events. We have our cleanup next week is at Independence Oaks County Park by Crooked Lake. We have a map on our website. It shows you exactly where to meet at 10 a.m. and we provide all the cleanup equipment. On July 9th, we have a trash run. So that's actually where we get in canoes and canoe down the river picking up trash. It's quite a lot of fun, especially if you like a little bit of a challenge. And then next week we have 2 paddling safety workshops. So if you're not super comfortable in a canoe or a kayak, there's going to be an hour-long session on land teaching you about, the basics of paddling and how to stay safe and what to do if you get in trouble. And then we're actually going to do about an hour paddle down the river with guided instructors. And so that's a really good way to get involved if you're not super comfortable just yet, just popping in the river by yourself. One of our paddling safety tips is never paddle alone. So no matter what, you should always go with somebody. So there's a precursor to the workshop if you decide to come. All right, and that's all I've got. So I'm sorry, I thought I had a few more slides, but I did go a little bit faster than I thought. It's only 7:30. So if you guys have questions or any specifics about how we work with the city of Rochester, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a quick paddling question.
Yeah.
So I've wondered what parts of the Clinton River are good paddling areas. I know it's a little bit easier down toward Lake St. Clair, but what about up by Auburn Hills?
That's a very good question. So we actually have a paddling map on our website that shows the different routes where you can launch, where you can get out. It shows you the length of the trip, and it also shows you the difficulty. So between Auburn Hills and I would say Utica,
Livernois or Utica, yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a challenge. I mean, there's not like whitewater rapids, but there are a few rapids, and especially if the water level is really high and fast, it can be challenging. In the upper reaches of the Clinton, so in like Waterford and Keego Harbor and that area, it's a little slower and more narrow, and it's really vegetated. And then farther downstream, so when you're in like Utica, Shelby, Sterling Heights, Mount Clemens, the river gets wider and slower. So really there's all kinds of different skill levels, depending on what you're interested in. I would say Auburn Hills, I mean, that's where they do the Paddlepalooza race.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do our trash runs, we actually say that you have to be at least 14 in order to go, because there are some challenging parts of it. It's not like the Asable. It's definitely like the Asable.
Kathleen, there's a entrance, I think, to the Clinton River on Livernois and Avon Road in Rochester Hills.
Yeah.
What is the paddle difficulty or right there if you wanted to launch right there?
I would say it's intermediate. It's definitely not for a beginner.
Okay.
Just to be perfectly honest, our office is actually right at Avon and Livernois, and it just depends on the level too. There are some USGS gauges that show you the height of the river. I do not recommend to go after it rains for a couple of days, because the river is what's known as very flashy, meaning it rises and falls very quickly with different precipitation. So when right after a large rain event, it's not going to be safe to go in there. We don't recommend that people go. But I mean, a few days later, it's nice, because sometimes the river gets really low and then you're kind of dragging your boat, or you're getting out every once in a while to get through. So kind of got to find a good balance. Let me see if I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I can bring up the paddling map. I mean, we actually just created a paddling PSA. If it's okay, I will share a short video.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Selfishly.
Still have some time. Yeah.
I also have a question about the cleanup days, and if you like people to register in advance or just show up, what works best for that?
So you are welcome to come to any weekly clean without registering. We do ask that if you have a big group, just to give us a heads up.
Mm-hmm.
So you can email contact, CONTACT, @crwc.org. And just let us know. It's not absolutely essential, but it's nice to know when we're gonna have a big group. And then like trash runs, those do require registration because we have a limited amount of canoes. All right, I'm gonna play this video for you guys. We just made it a week ago, so I just like sharing it.
The Clinton River Water Trail ranges from steep gradients to slow-moving waters and provides over 72 miles to paddle and enjoy. But here's 10 tips you should keep in mind to make your paddling excursions excellent.
I always paddle with the proper safety equipment, having a life jacket, a whistle, your phone in a dry bag, and sometimes even a knife to get you out of a sticky situation. Having all of these standard safety pieces of equipment will give you a great experience on the water and putting safety first.
Never paddle alone. Always paddle with a friend. Never paddle alone. Never get separated on the river.
It's the buddy system. It's always more fun to paddle with friends.
Be aware of the daylight. Sunset may be beautiful, but it can be dangerous to paddle and navigate in the dark. Make sure you leave enough time to comfortably finish your trip.
Be aware of the stream flow. Check the stream flow through the United States Geological Gauge nearest to your intended trip. Visually inspect the flow before you go into the river. If it is too fast, please wait till it recedes. The only thing you need to prove to me is that you know your limits and know how to be safe.
Wear river footwear. Protect your feet from sharp river rocks. Always wear protective footwear.
Be aware of the water temperature. Cold water is extremely dangerous as it draws heat from the body 25 times faster than air.
Know how to swim before embarking on a river trip. You're out on the water. Swim like a swan.
Be aware of the weather. It's Michigan. Everyone knows the weather can change very quickly, especially during the summer. Know the forecast ahead of time and plan accordingly, because as we know, the weather can change very, very quickly.
You're likely to get wet. Bring an extra change of clothes in a dry bag to prevent hypothermia, and a wet car seat on the ride home.
Know how to recognize the safety signs located throughout the Clinton River. To get help, dial 911. First responders know the exact location of each sign. Make sure you're aware of your surroundings and can communicate your position to emergency responders.
With these tips in mind, you'll find the Clinton River offers a great way to spend the day right in your own backyard.
I forgot to mention that earlier. There are safety signs stationed along the river, and they have a unique color for every community, and they also have the name of each community and a number. So if you do decide to embark on the river, which I encourage you to do, it is a lot of fun. If you do get into trouble, make sure you bring a phone and a dry bag, and all the first responders, whether it's police, fire, or EMS, they have a pre-planned route to get to each of those signs. So it's very useful in terms of if you do get into trouble, you can say, I just passed Rochester safety sign number 10, and they'll be able to find you. Does anybody else have any questions? Sorry that I didn't take up the whole hour. I guess I talked really fast.
Other questions, people? You have to unmute yourselves, I think, if you have a question. Or you could type it in the chat.
I guess I have a question, if you can hear me, Kathy here. Do you have other, faith organizations that, typically take part in your things, or is that something that you know of other groups that do that?
Actually, yes. So a lot of faith organizations are very active because it tends to be a lot of people that like to do good for the community. So we're really excited about you guys reaching out to us. I know that we are very involved with the church in Clarkston, and if anything, a lot of people reach out to us just to do a presentation and educate themselves and learn more. So we're super excited. I could see lots of potential for you guys. Either you could be your own Adopt a Stream team, so you'd be able to learn and go out with your team from your parish, or you could do a cleanup as a group. You can even do a cleanup whenever you want. We have a cleanup request survey where you can just request, a date, time, location. We give you the kit, we give you grabbers, we give you and masks if you need them, gloves, anything that you need for a group event. And we have a little cleanup card. It's like a little postcard. So you fill it out and you say, we found, we filled up 10 bags of trash, and maybe we also ask like the weirdest thing that you found. So we found a rubber duck or a garden gnome, or, do we try to keep it fun? So.
I just wanted to add that I'm involved with the Great Lakes Education Program on the Clinton River. We take fourth graders out on the boat and we do a series of scientific experiments to discover what the water quality is. Also, water conservation we take into the schools. So there are other programs that are working alongside to educate the children at a time when it's important that they learn before they have a lawn and have to wash a car.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's Justin Selden.
Justin Selden is our director. Yes, that's through Michigan State University Extension.
Yeah, no, he's great. We're currently trying to figure out how we can collaborate more, because we have a stream leaders program. I forgot to mention it. That's another way you guys could volunteer if you wanted to be a stream leaders mentor. But we do work with schools anywhere from 4th grade to 12th grade, and we take them out on the river and they collect water quality data, and they analyze it and report it. So it's a way for them to not only get involved in their local community, but they do some stewardship efforts, and they're also learning how to analyze and work with data. And then in the fall, we have what's called Student Congress, and we bring all the schools back together to present their findings to each other in like a conference style event. So it's a lot of fun. The pandemic really dampened that program, which was unfortunate, but we just this spring finally went out with 3 different schools. We normally work with about 25 schools in the spring and 3,000 students over the course of the year. So we're still really working at a reduced level, but I'm hoping that this fall we'll be able to bring it back up to speed.
Can you clarify too, Kathleen? You had mentioned the different sub-watersheds, but do you also work on the Paint Creek or mostly just with the Clinton River?
We also do work with Paint Creek. So we have there were a couple different restoration projects where we received grant funding to work with the Paint Creek. I can think of one specifically in Lake Orion. There was some stream restoration there. We work with projects along Lake St Clair. Gallagher Creek is also really important for trout fisheries and things like that. When it comes to applying for grant funding, it's really important that you have, I guess, something that you're managing for. So whether it's wildlife such as fish or macroinvertebrates, or something tangible like the water quality if you're doing testing, and then you're showing how it's improving. And that's also what's really important about our Adopt a Stream program, is that these are restoration areas that we're monitoring. We've been doing this for 20 years. And like I said, we only have 6 full-time staff. So training people on how to collect this data is really important, to send people out to like 50 different sites. We wouldn't be able to do it ourselves. And there has been some studies done that this data is just as important and just as valid and correct as, people that are, I guess, professionally trained. But yeah, it's really important for us to have that program be really robust and to continue.
Hi, Kathleen. This is Jane Brown. My husband and I have been listening. We're in a car, so we don't have our video on. But actually, each one of us has a question. His question is, he's wondering if you could speak for a moment about the pollution in the Clinton River. I know you had a piece on that earlier, but he grew up in St Clair Shores, and he and his brother have paddled the Clinton River for many years, probably 30, 40 years. And there have been significant issues with pollution and things in the river. So he's wondering how that has improved or changed over the years. And my question is, what is your area of greatest need as an organization? I'm just curious, what is your top priority, and what do you need the most?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the first one. Yeah, Lake St. Clair. I know there are events every year where there's algae and what some people perceive as sewage coming up. A lot of that is a natural process of the water turning over. So in the winter, the water gets really cold and then the top heats up and it moves around and it sinks. So overall, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, 50 years ago, there wasn't any live fish in the main branch of the river up into the north branch. And Lake St. Clair was in kind of dire straits too. There are still some issues present, but we have a prized trout fishery in the main branch of the river, and Lake St. Clair actually has the biggest bass fishery in the country, believe it or not. Lake St. Clair is unique that it's a very large lake, but it's not very deep, as your husband probably knows. I think it's an average depth of 10 or 11 feet. So it's really good for warm water fish like bass and other things like that. We're constantly working to make the water quality better. So GLEWA, which is the Great Lakes Water Authority, they actually are one of the biggest drinking water plants in the country, and they provide all the drinking water that's taken from Lake St. Clair. There's 13 different drinking water source uptakes along the shore of Lake St. Clair. So they're constantly studying, the different pollution sources, how to make it better. One issue that we're running into is E. coli on beaches. I'm sure if you guys have ever gone to the Metro Park, you've encountered a day when the beach has been closed because of an E. coli outbreak, which comes from fecal matter. So there's actually a lot of research being done on the source of it, and some people believe it's coming from some agricultural, like cattle farms in the North Branch. Some of it's even coming from Canada. If you've ever looked at a map, Canada that borders Lake St. Clair is mostly farms. So like the US side is a lot of developed areas. On Canada side, it's a lot of farms. So they're worried that it's coming across the lake from there. People are also worried that it's coming from combined sewer overflows. So there's a lot of different research being done through Wayne State University, the University of Michigan, and Michigan State to try to determine the source of that pollution and then how to mitigate it. People also think it's geese. So the Metro Park actually hired, they're called Goosebusters. They're Australian shepherds that are just trained to chase geese off of the beach. So trying to look at that. There are a lot of different regional efforts happening right now to tackle these issues because it is our drinking water source and we want to make sure that it stays clean. Does that answer that question?
About the sediments change.
Yeah, well, he's asking about the sediments. I'm not sure. You can ask me.
The pollution in the sediments was, I remember back in the 70s, it was pretty significant. Oil dumps occurring, and like you said, there was no fish throughout the whole system. And I just wonder if that's being tracked as far as the river sediments and how they're improving in the different areas.
Okay. I'm sure that it is being tracked. So EGLE, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, they actually have permits. And this is one of the reasons because there is still contamination present in these sediments, right? And they've been there for years. It's not always clear who's responsible for cleaning it up. And so when it comes to like removing, it's called a bottom land, which would be the bottom of the lake. You have to have a permit because when you move the earth, that's when you're going to release the pollutants. When they're down there, they're locked up. I'm not saying it's a good solution. They are still there. But when it comes to like if you're doing construction, like the Detroit River, there's this whole waterfront rehabilitation thing that's happening, and they're moving a lot of sediment over there that's highly polluted because that was a huge industrial area along the river. So right now, I'm sure there are areas in the lake that have contaminants that are persistent in the sediments, but in order to dredge the entire lake, I don't know if it's feasible. So it's done, a little bit at a time. We don't specifically do any of that testing. I think Macomb County Health Department, as well as the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy probably have more data on that, and they could speak to that better.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then for your question about our area of greatest need, I would probably say time and money. We, as a small nonprofit organization, like I said, we have 6 people, and it's a 760-mile service area. We work with 45 different communities to help them comply with their public education requirements, as well as provide different services like educational services, our stream leaders and our adopt-a stream. So we're constantly running. If we had more people and more money as an organization, we could certainly expand what we do. I have ideas. I would love to be able to expand our technical services to provide services to groups like you guys or homeowners associations. I'd love to be in front of planning commissions and city councils every day, but it's just, I mean, I can't be in 2 places at once. So those are probably our greatest needs. That's why we rely a lot on volunteers and our partners.
Thank you. I have another question, if that's okay. We
Absolutely.
used to live around between 23 and 24 in Shelby Road. And I remember about, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, everybody had to get their water tested because that toxic waste dump at 23 and Ryan was discovered. And they were testing the soils at the schools. And I remember at some point there was concern that that stuff was leaking into the water system.
Shed.
Is that into the watershed? Is that something that gets tracked? Is that all being controlled now? I know that whole area has been kind of managed as far as the land goes, and there's vents and all these things now, but are there still concerns about some of those toxic waste dumps in the Macomb County area
Like Crystal
of that
Lake.
stuff getting into the water still?
That's a good question. I'm not specifically familiar with that area. I do know that there are extremely strict regulations when it comes to dumps. Like a landfill is, a lot of people think that it's just something that you dump waste into and then it leaks into the ground, but a landfill is actually designed to be a impermeable bowl. So it's gonna catch stuff, and the reason I know this is we work closely with Waste Management. I think that 1 square foot of the liner of a landfill is like $500 because it's several different layers that are designed to completely contain all of that waste. I'm not sure I can speak to the waste that was, from 23 years ago. I would imagine that it's cleaned up by now. Drinking water in schools has to be tested regularly, as well as drinking water sources for municipal sources. The only drinking water source that's not well regulated is private wells. So private drinking wells, it's up to the homeowner to test it and make sure that it's safe. And when a house is sold, it's required to be tested. Michigan is the only state that doesn't have a statewide septic code, which we've been trying to work on getting that changed because it needs to be changed. But as far as, pollution from a dump, I'm sure that at this point it wouldn't be persisting, that it would be illegal for it to still be contaminating drinking water.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Well, Kathleen, I want to, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for your time and willingness to reschedule for tonight.
No problem.
And to present us with a lot to think about. And I'm sure we'll be getting back to you and your organization after we kind of sift through some of these options and think about ways that we can be involved. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I know I gave you guys a lot of information. We have resources on our website if you want to revisit it. And just remember, small steps, you don't have to do everything all at once. I remind myself that all the time. So we can all get there. But I really appreciate you guys being here and listening, and hope to work with you soon.
Thanks so much. And I will post this on YouTube. If you know of anyone who missed this presentation and wants to see it, it'll be on YouTube by tomorrow, so they can watch it anytime. Thanks, Kathleen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good night.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.